Welcome back. Today I wanted to go over do-it-yourself repairs versus hiring a contractor. So there's several things I'm going to cover in this video: what's involved with doing a repair, the tools you may need, the equipment, the time it's typically going to take you, the skill set required, the condition of the materials and whether it's even a feasible repair, and then lastly the warranty. So the four ones I'm going to be reviewing are the most common repairs that I see in the roofing industry, which is going to be your shingle repair, your pipe boot repair, a chimney leak repair, tarping, and then lastly a skylight repair. So I'm going to start with the most common, which is a shingle repair. So you're walking around your home, you know some shingles in your yard, or you look up and you see shingles starting to slide off the roof. So what's going to be involved in a shingle repair? The first thing you want to consider is how much equipment am I going to have to purchase? Roofing equipment can be expensive based on the fact a lot of the equipment, it has one function, which is just to keep a roofing contractor safe or a laborer while they are up on the roof. Depending on where the repair is located, if it's on the eave, meaning it's right above the gutter, if it's on the middle of the roof, or if it's all the way on the top, that's where it's going to involve a good bit more equipment. So if it's something where it's on the eave, when say all you need is a ladder and a couple hand tools, that's something that may be 100% feasible. But once you get into the middle of the roof, when you're getting up towards the top of the ridge, that's when a lot of what we call fall protection is going to be needed, and it's going to be a lot more expensive. And to be honest, unless you're doing repairs all the time, it may not be worth purchasing $1,000 worth of fall equipment just to do a quick repair when you can just hire somebody. This is one of the big things that's going to be an overlaying theme throughout this video, is if it's going to cost more for me to do it than it is to just pay somebody, it probably is going to make more sense to just hire a professional, make sure it's done the right way, and make sure there's no accidents when you're going to try and fix it yourself. First thing I'm going to touch on, so going back to a shingle repair, if it is something you want to take on yourself, I'm not going to go super in depth in this video, but you want to make sure you measure the shingle because there's a big variety between manufacturers based on the size of the shingle. So when you're going up, you're putting your ladder up on the gutter, up on the eave of the roof, making sure you're measuring the proper width and then the proper exposure of the shingle. A lot of the times you can find something that's pretty comparable. Keep in mind how old the roof is, because if it is 10, 12, 15 years old, the sun is going to greatly fade those shingles and you probably won't have something that's going to perfectly match, even if it's the exact same shingle. The condition of the material is also going to play a big factor in whether it's even repairable or not. So when you're looking at a roof and you notice in your gutters there's piles of granules, or the color of the roof is very faded, meaning there's not a lot of granules actually packed into the shingle anymore, this can be a really big indicator that the roof is substantially older. Roofing material is an aggregate material, meaning it does break down over time. So if you have something called a 3-tab shingle or an architectural style shingle, once you get into that 13 to 15 to 18 year range, these materials are nearing the end of their lifespan regardless of what the warranty says on the package. And when it's nearing the end of its lifespan, they become very hard to repair without damaging the shingles around them, and you may end up with a lot more work than you bargained for. So that's something you may want to consider, is if it is too old, it may not be something where you can just do a quick repair, and you may need to look into an actual replacement. But again, when it comes to those kinds of decisions, ultimately you want to get a professional out there to make sure. Second one I'm going to touch on is something called a pipe boot repair. This is one of the most common areas that I see leak on a home. The normal pipe boots that most roofing contractors put on a roof are only going to last you about 10 to 12 years, sometimes sooner, on the occasion longer. This is going to depend on the condition of the pipe boot. When it comes to equipment, it's obviously going to depend on where it's located on the roof. Again, if you're not comfortable with heights or comfortable with ladders, I don't recommend you buying a 2-story aluminum ladder and working 40 feet off the ground. Leave that for something for a professional. These ones that don't last a long time are typically made a mixture of plastic and rubber. It depends on why it's failing. Obviously, if it's leaking because the exposed nails just need a little bit of sealant, that's a pretty easy fix, may be feasible. If the plastic itself is cracked where the whole pipe boot needs to be replaced, depending on where it's located, probably something you may need to hire a professional for. Keep in mind, a lot of the times you need to make sure, if you do have a professional come out, they take pictures of what's wrong and actually show them to you, because a lot of the times the rubber around the seals crack, and there's something called a repair collar that's very cheap. You can get it almost any hardware store that you can cut with a razor knife, slip over the top, and boom, get another 5 to 8 years out of that pipe boot, and it'll last you until the roof actually needs to be replaced. So the hand tools needed to replace a pipe boot are pretty minimal. It's really just accessibility when it comes to a lot of things up on a roof. Next thing I want to touch on is going to be your chimney repair. This is something where I do not recommend, unless you're an experienced contractor, very familiar with materials, that you do yourself. I always recommend hiring a roofing professional or contractor when it comes to doing a chimney repair. Reason being, there is so many reasons why a chimney can leak. Based on the material, it could be an issue with the siding, it could be an issue with the mortar starting to fall out. I've seen that many a times on brick chimneys. Also, a chimney cap that goes on top of the chimney, if it's indented in, concave, it's much older, it's been hit or struck by something, and it's ponding water after it rains, sometimes that water can seep through and you would see a leak inside the chimney where it's not even necessarily roof related. So those are a couple reasons it could be leaking. Now when it comes to the roof, most of the time it is the flashing, but if the shingles are completely worn through, a good wind-driven rain could bring that water up to the nails underneath the shingles and it could slowly leak that way. Or if a chimney is too wide, it could be missing a cricket, which is known as a code item, to divert the water away from the backside of the chimney. I say all this to say there's so many reasons a chimney could be leaking that I highly recommend hiring a professional. A lot of the times it's hard to even identify as a professional where the leak is coming from. Most of the time we go out to look at these things, we have to water test them. Meaning somebody stands up on the roof with a water hose and somebody's at the bottom or inside. After they turn on the water hose, the person on the roof starts at the bottom and slowly works their way to the top until they start to see the leak come through. So one of those ones, I just advise staying away from trying to do it yourself. Hire a professional. Fourth thing is going to be tarping. This usually is not that labor intensive. The big factor here is just going to be where you have to tarp the shingles, if it's close to the eave, or how much you're going to have to tarp. If it's after a really big storm and it's sporadic damages all over the roof, some of these tarping projects, even when you know what you're doing, can take a good bit of time and a good bit of material. I have a video that I'll put up that you can see exactly how to do it if it's something where you have a walkable roof where you don't need a lot of safety equipment and it's perfectly feasible to do yourself. Hats off to you. Make sure you get it done properly, divert that water, and then it's a case closed. But if it's too labor intensive, you're not comfortable working on a roof, because I can tell you from personal experience, it is very different working on a roof than it is when you're working on the ground. You don't have the luxury of a table, being able to set tools down just anywhere. You're working on an elevated surface, stuff can slip, stuff can fall. Always bring an extra nail, always bring extra materials, because once something falls off a roof, you don't want to go back down and pick it up, trust me. So if it's super sporadic, something you may want to consider hiring a professional. The good news is, after a big storm, most of the time, as long as it's warranted, insurance companies are going to cover the cost of a tarp, so it's better off to just have somebody that knows what they're doing professionally to prevent any leaks from happening until proper repairs can be made. Last one I want to get into is a skylight repair. This again is something that I recommend hiring a professional to do. Number one, they can be kind of hard to diagnose as well, because there's usually a couple reasons why it could be leaking. Could be the flashing around it, it could be the seal, it could be the shingles, and depending on the condition of the shingles, this is again another event where you run into where a slope may have to be replaced or an entire roof may need to be replaced to prevent it from leaking again. As far as the skylight goes, if it's an older skylight, most of the time you can't find a flashing kit to replace them, and it's something where you have to hand bend the metal, and making sure that that's set up properly to divert that water is very, very critical. Because a lot of the times I go up there, I'll see some homemade repairs where people just line the outside with roofing cement or sealant, and yes, that may temporarily fix you, but it's just not a permanent solution, even a 1 to 2 year permanent solution. A lot of the times, a good rule of thumb that I just tell everybody is if a skylight was installed when the roof was replaced and you're running into the 10-15 year mark, if the shingles can be repaired, a lot of the times it's a good idea to just go ahead and get a new skylight. A newer skylight can also be reused because you can reorder a new flashing kit. So to double down on the example, let's say your roof is 12 years old and your skylight's leaking, they don't have an existing flashing kit that you can reuse. You can still go ahead and replace that skylight. The shingles around it are going to be okay to repair. And then 5 years down the road when you need a new roof, a lot of these companies, you can order a new skylight flashing kit, reuse that skylight because it's only 5 years old, reflash it, and boom, still get another great lifespan out of that skylight. When it comes to warranties, our warranties on repairs are usually going to be a year or two depending on exactly what the repair is. So that's also something you may want to consider or ask about when you're getting a quote to do a repair. I hope this video has been super helpful. Again, covered all the basic when it comes to most of the general repairs I run into as a roofing contractor. So weigh it out, see what's actually feasible to do yourself, watch a video on it, and stay safe out there. Thanks for watching.